Admiral Sarachon stood before the massive holographic display in the Terran Command Center, watching as red dots representing the Zephyrian hegemony's fleet moved steadily toward the outer edge of human space. The assembled officers behind her maintained perfect silence, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. After 3 centuries of expansion, humanity had finally encountered something that demanded their absolute attention. Status report, Commander Hayes. Chin commanded without turning from the display. Commander Marcus Hayes stepped forward, his tablet glowing with incoming data streams. The Zephyrian fleet consists of approximately 2,000 vessels, Admiral. Intelligence suggests they're conducting what they call a compliance sweep through this sector. 17 civilizations have already submitted to their authority in the past 6 months. Chen's jaw tightened. She had read the reports from those fallen worlds. The Zephyrians offered a simple choice: submit to the hegemony and become a vassal species, or face complete orbital bombardment. Most civilizations chose survival over pride. Most civilizations weren't human. Have they made contact with our border stations? She asked. Yes, Admiral. Station Prometheus received their first communication 3 hours ago. The Zephyrians are demanding passage through human space to reach the Centauri cluster. They've stated that resistance will be met with what they term corrective action. The hologram shifted, zooming in on the border region where Prometheus Station orbited a small dwarf star. The station had been built as an early warning post, never intended to face a fleet of this magnitude. Yet its crew of 300 souls now stood as humanity's first line of defense against an empire that spanned half the galaxy. Chen finally turned to face her staff. The Terran Command Center had been carved into Luna's surface, its walls lined with quantum computers and communication arrays that connected Earth to every human colony across 200 light-years of space. Representatives from the Colonial Parliament, the Defense Ministry, and the Science Directorate filled the tiered seating, all waiting for her decision. Gentlemen and ladies, Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human determination. We stand at a crossroads. The Zephyrian hegemony believes they can simply demand passage through our territory, treating us as they would any other species in their path. They are about to learn why that assumption is profoundly mistaken. Dr. Elizabeth Kovac, head of the Science Directorate, raised her hand. Admiral, our analysis of captured Zephyrian technology suggests their weapons systems are significantly more advanced than our current generation of defensive platforms. Their ships utilize directed energy weapons with approximately 40% more efficiency than our particle beam arrays. Thank you, Doctor, Chen replied. Commander Hayes, what's our current fleet disposition? Hayes consulted his tablet. The Third Fleet is conducting maneuvers near Tau Ceti, approximately 60 light-years from the contact zone. The Seventh Fleet is stationed at New Geneva, and the First Fleet remains here in the Sol system. Combined, we have roughly 400 capital ships available for immediate deployment. The numbers told a sobering story. 2,000 enemy ships against 400 human vessels. On paper, it appeared to be a massacre waiting to happen. But Chen had spent 40 years in the Terran Navy, rising from a junior officer to the highest command position in human space. She understood something that the Zephyrians, in their galactic arrogance, had failed to grasp. Humans didn't fight fair. Dr. Kovac, what's the status of Project Prometheus? The scientist's eyes lit up with barely contained excitement. The prototype testing concluded last week, Admiral. All 7 trials were successful. The deployment systems are ready for field implementation. Excellent. Commander Hayes, send the following message to all fleet commanders. Execute Operation Threshold Defense. Dr. Kovac, initiate Prometheus Protocol authorization. I want those systems online and positioned within 12 hours. The command center erupted into controlled activity. Officers hurried to their stations, initiating communication sequences with ships scattered across human space. The massive holographic display began updating in real time as fleet movements commenced throughout the colonial territories. Chun moved to a smaller tactical display, where the Zephyrian fleet continued its inexorable approach toward human space. Intelligence estimates suggested they would reach the border in approximately 18 hours. 18 hours to prepare for a war that would determine whether humanity remained free or joined the ranks of the hegemony's vassal species. Minister James Caldwell, the Defense Ministry's senior representative, approached the admiral. His weathered face showed the strain of coordinating humanity's military response across dozens of worlds. Admiral, the Parliament is demanding to know our chances of success. The colonial governors are asking whether they should begin evacuation procedures. Tell the Parliament that evacuation is not an option, Chen replied firmly. As for our chances, Minister, that depends entirely on how well the Zephyrians have studied human history. Caldwell frowned. I don't understand. Chen smiled grimly. The Zephyrians have conquered 17 civilizations in 6 months. They've studied our technology, our fleet compositions, our defensive capabilities. What they haven't studied is what makes humans different from every other species they've encountered. She gestured toward the holographic display, where the positions of human colonies appeared as blue dots scattered across space. Every other species they've faced has been unified under a single government, with standardized military doctrine and predictable strategic responses. They expect us to meet them in open battle, ship against ship, following the conventional rules of galactic warfare. And we're not going to do that. Minister, humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've developed every possible form of conflict, from guerrilla warfare to total economic destruction. The Zephyrians are about to discover that humans don't limit themselves to military solutions when civilian solutions are more effective. The Admiral moved to another console, where real-time communications from the outer colonies streamed across multiple screens. Mining stations reported increased production of rare metals. Agricultural worlds confirmed food shipment schedules. Manufacturing centers provided updates on equipment assembly lines. To an outside observer, it would appear that human civilization was continuing business as usual while a massive alien fleet approached their borders. That appearance was deliberately deceptive. Commander Hayes approached with an urgent message. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Morrison at Prometheus Station. The Zephyrians are attempting direct communication. Put it through on the main display. The hologram shifted, showing the bridge of Prometheus Station. Captain Sarah Morrison, a 30-year veteran of the Colonial Defense Force, appeared before them. Behind her, the station's bridge crew worked at their stations with calm professionalism despite the circumstances. Admiral Chun, we're receiving what appears to be a formal diplomatic communication from the Zephyrian fleet. They're requesting permission to speak directly with Earth's leadership. Denied, Chun replied immediately. Captain, you are authorized to speak for humanity in all matters concerning the Zephyrian approach. Make that clear to them. Morrison nodded. Understood, Admiral. Should I inform them of our position regarding passage through human space? Negative. Allow them to make their demands first. I want their complete position on record before we respond. The communication ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Chun understood the importance of this moment. How humanity responded to the Zephyrian demands would establish the precedent for every future encounter with galactic powers. Show weakness now, and every empire in the galaxy would view human space as territory ripe for conquest. Dr. Kovac approached with a tablet, displaying technical specifications. Admiral, the Prometheus installations are coming online ahead of schedule. The first 3 units will be operational within 6 hours. Chun studied the data with satisfaction. Project Prometheus had consumed nearly a decade of research and development, drawing on humanity's most advanced understanding of quantum mechanics and gravitational manipulation. The Zephyrians expected to face conventional weapon systems. They were about to encounter something entirely beyond their experience. Excellent work, Doctor. What about the secondary systems? The Hercules platforms are positioned and ready for activation. The Titan arrays are still in transit, but they'll be in position before the Zephyrian fleet reaches the engagement zone. The Admiral nodded approvingly. Humanity's response to the Zephyrian threat wasn't limited to military hardware. 3 centuries of expansion had taught humans valuable lessons about resource management, logistics coordination, and strategic thinking on an interstellar scale. While other species focused on building larger ships and more powerful weapons, humans had developed something far more dangerous. They had learned to think systematically. A new alert sounded across the command center. Commander Hayes checked his console and looked up with concern. "Admiral, we're receiving emergency transmissions from the Rigel system. A Zephyrian advance force has entered their outer system and is demanding immediate surrender." Chun felt a cold anger building in her chest. The Rigel system housed nearly 2 million colonists across 4 planets. The system's main world, New Scotland, had been settled by refugees from Earth's climate wars 2 centuries ago. These people had built their civilization from nothing, transforming barren worlds into thriving communities through determination and ingenuity. What's their defensive capability? Limited, Admiral. 2 patrol ships and a handful of system defense platforms. The colonists are requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Denied. Send the following message to Governor MacLeod. Stand firm. Help is coming. Minister Caldwell looked alarmed. Admiral, 2 million civilians are at risk. Surely evacuation is the prudent course. Chun turned to face him, her expression hard as steel. Minister, if we evacuate Rigel, where does it end? Do we evacuate New Geneva when they arrive there? Do we evacuate Earth itself when their main fleet reaches Sol? At what point do we stop running and start fighting? The command center fell silent. Chen's words carried the weight of human history, echoing the voices of leaders who had faced impossible odds and chosen to fight rather than surrender. From ancient battlefields to the void between stars, humanity had always found a way to turn disadvantage into victory. Dr. Kovac, how quickly can we deploy a Prometheus unit to the Rigel system? The scientist consulted her calculations. 18 hours minimum. Admiral, the transport ships aren't designed for emergency deployment. Then, we'll have to use alternative methods. Commander Hayes, contact Admiral Reeves aboard the Leviathan. I want the 3rd Fleet's fastest ships en route to Rigel within the hour. Hayes nodded and immediately began coordinating with Fleet Command. The Leviathan was humanity's most advanced dreadnought, equipped with experimental weapon systems and staffed by the Colonial Navy's elite personnel. If any force could buy time for the Rigel colonists, it would be Admiral Reeves and his battle group. The holographic display updated to show new ship movements as the 3rd Fleet began its emergency deployment. Red indicators marked the estimated arrival times for both human and Zephyrian forces in the Rigel system. The mathematics were unforgiving. Even at maximum acceleration, the human relief force would arrive nearly 6 hours after the Zephyrian deadline. Chun studied the tactical situation with the analytical mind that had made her the most successful fleet commander in human space. The Zephyrians were following a predictable pattern, dividing their forces to pressure multiple human systems simultaneously. They expected humanity to scatter its defenses, weakening the overall resistance to their main advance. They were about to discover their first major miscalculation. Dr. Kovac, initiate communication with all research stations. I want every prototype weapon system, every experimental technology, every theoretical project that might provide an advantage. This is not the time for cautious testing procedures. The scientist nodded eagerly. Admiral, there are several projects that could be field-ready within hours. The Quantum Torpedo program has produced 12 functional warheads. The gravitational mine system has been tested successfully in controlled environments. Deploy everything. Conventional warfare tactics won't work against an empire that's conquered half the galaxy. We need to show them something they've never seen before. Minister Caldwell looked uncomfortable. Admiral, many of those experimental systems haven't completed safety testing. The risks to our own forces could be substantial. Chen's expression remained unchanged. Minister, the risk of conquest is greater than the risk of experimental weapons. Humanity didn't reach the stars by playing it safe. Another alert interrupted their conversation. The main display showed an incoming transmission from Prometheus Station. Captain Morrison appeared, her expression tense but controlled. Admiral, the Zephyrian Fleet Commander has responded to our communication. They're demanding a formal meeting to discuss terms of passage through human space. They've given us 12 hours to respond with a meeting location. What's your assessment, Captain? They seem surprised that we haven't immediately agreed to their demands, Admiral. The Fleet Commander, who identifies himself as War Prime Thektar, appears confused by our delay in responding to what he considers a routine request. Shin smiled coldly. Excellent. Confusion is the first step toward defeat. Captain, inform War Prime Thektar that humanity will indeed meet with his representatives. The meeting will take place at the coordinates I'm transmitting now. The Admiral input a set of spatial coordinates in her console. The location she had chosen was approximately 2 light hours from Prometheus Station, in an area of space that appeared completely empty on all sensor scans. Morrison received the coordinates and frowned. Admiral, these coordinates show nothing but vacuum. Are you certain this is correct? Trust me, Captain. When War Prime Thektar arrives at those coordinates, he'll find exactly what he needs to understand humanity's position. The communication ended, leaving the command center buzzing with activity. Chin moved to a secure terminal and began inputting authorization codes for systems that had never been tested in actual combat. The Zephyrians expected to negotiate with a primitive species that would gladly trade territory for survival. Instead, they were about to meet the descendants of a world that had survived ice ages, plague outbreaks, world wars, and the near collapse of civilization. Humans who had learned to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity, every setback into a lesson for future victory. Commander Hayes approached with updated fleet positions. Admiral, the Third Fleet is accelerating toward Rigel at maximum burn. Admiral Reeves reports that his ships will arrive approximately 4 hours after the Zephyrian deadline. And the Prometheus installations? The first unit is online and operational. The targeting systems are locked onto the designated coordinates. Shin nodded with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Zephyrians would learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the accumulated wisdom of a species that had never accepted defeat as final. Dr. Kovac returned with technical reports from across human space. Admiral, the research stations are reporting remarkable progress. It seems that the prospect of immediate combat has accelerated innovation beyond all previous benchmarks. How so? The Luna facility has produced a functional prototype of the quantum disruption field. The Mars laboratories have completed testing on the molecular disintegration beam. Even the civilian research stations are contributing. The agricultural researchers on New Texas have developed a biological agent that disrupts Zephyrian atmospheric processing systems. Chin raised an eyebrow. Biological warfare from agricultural researchers? They started with pest control systems for crop protection. Admiral. Apparently, the transition to anti-Zephyrian applications was relatively straightforward. The Admiral couldn't suppress a smile. This was quintessentially human. Faced with an existential threat, every aspect of human civilization was adapting to contribute to the defense effort. From military researchers to farmers, everyone was finding ways to turn their expertise into weapons against the invaders. The main display chimed with an incoming priority message. The transmission originated from the Centauri system, where human colonists had established mining operations on several asteroid clusters. The message was brief, but alarming. Admiral Chun, this is Director Sarah Walsh at Centauri Mining Station 7. We've detected a large fleet approaching our position from Galactic North. Estimated arrival time is 14 hours. The ships match Zephyrian design patterns. Request immediate instructions. Chin studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Zephyrians were moving faster than anticipated, with multiple fleets converging on human space from different directions. They weren't simply demanding passage through human territory. They were positioning themselves for a complete invasion. Commander Hayes, update all fleet dispositions. I want real-time tracking of every Zephyrian ship within 50 light-years of human space. The holographic display transformed into a three-dimensional map showing the movement of alien fleets throughout the region. Red indicators marked Zephyrian positions while blue dots represented human forces. The strategic situation was becoming clear. The hegemony wasn't interested in negotiation or peaceful passage. They intended to conquer human space entirely. Minister Caldwell studied the display with growing alarm. Admiral, this isn't a compliance sweep. This is a full-scale invasion. They're approaching our territory from 7 different vectors. Yes, they are, Chen agreed calmly, which means our response needs to be appropriately comprehensive. She activated the emergency command protocol, sending immediate alerts to every human military installation across 200 light-years of space. Colonial governors received deployment orders. Fleet commanders got targeting coordinates. Research facilities obtained authorization for the immediate weaponization of experimental technology. Dr. Kovac looked up from her console with excitement. Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from all Prometheus installations. The network is fully operational. Excellent. Commander Hayes, send the following message to War Prime Thektar. Humanity accepts your request for a meeting. Our representative will be waiting at the designated coordinates. Hayes looked confused. Admiral, who exactly will be representing humanity at these negotiations? Chen smiled grimly. The most eloquent spokesperson our species has ever produced, Commander. One whose words have convinced every opponent we've ever faced. The command center continued its frantic activity as the deadline approached. Communications flowed between Earth and the scattered colonies, coordinating a defense effort that spanned dozens of worlds. Supply ships accelerated toward strategic positions. Civilian populations received emergency instructions. Military units prepared for combat operations unlike anything in human experience. Admiral Chun stood before the tactical display, watching as the final pieces of humanity's response moved into position. The Zephyrians had studied human military capabilities and found them wanting. They had analyzed human technology and deemed it primitive. They had examined human territorial holdings and concluded that conquest would be swift and decisive. What they had failed to understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. Not preparing for the Zephyrians specifically, but for the inevitable encounter with a hostile galactic power that would demand submission or destruction. Humanity's answer would be delivered in 12 hours. War Prime Thektar would learn what 17 other species had failed to grasp before their surrender. Humans didn't negotiate from positions of weakness. The chronometer on the main display showed 11 hours and 37 minutes until the scheduled meeting. Chun felt the familiar calm that came before major combat operations. Every decision had been made, every resource allocated, every contingency planned. Now came the waiting and then the test of whether human determination could overcome galactic experience. She was about to find out if 3 centuries of human expansion had produced a civilization capable of standing against an empire that spanned half the galaxy. The Zephyrians were about to discover why no force in human history had ever succeeded in conquering Earth's children for long. Commander Hayes approached with the final status reports. Admiral, all systems are ready. The Prometheus network is online, the fleet deployments are complete, and our diplomatic representative is in position at the meeting coordinates. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Then, let's show the galaxy what humanity means when it says no War Prime Thektar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the inevitable conquest, surveying the primitive region of space that these creatures called their territory. His 4 arms moved in the traditional gestures of contemplation as he studied the tactical displays surrounding his command throne. In his 3 centuries of service to the Zephyrian hegemony, He had overseen the integration of 47 species into the Empire's vast domain. This would be the 48th. The humans had requested a meeting, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Most species attempted some form of diplomatic solution before accepting the inevitable reality of hegemony rule. The coordinates they had provided showed empty space, which suggested they intended to meet in neutral territory. Such caution was actually encouraging. It demonstrated that they understood the gravity of their situation. War Prime, his tactical coordinator, reported, the human fleet movements show interesting patterns. They appear to be consolidating forces in several key systems rather than massing for a single decisive engagement. Fektar's secondary eyes focused on the strategic display. Human ships were indeed moving throughout their territory, but not in the chaotic retreat pattern that usually preceded surrender. Their movements showed discipline and coordination. Perhaps these creatures possessed more military sophistication than their primitive technology suggested. Analysis Strategos Vekhal, his chief strategic advisor, a veteran of countless integration campaigns, gestured with 3 arms while consulting data streams. The humans appear to be following a dispersed defense protocol, War Prime. They're preparing for multiple simultaneous engagements rather than concentrating their forces for maximum impact. Curious. Are they perhaps intending to fight a delaying action while evacuating their core worlds? Negative War Prime. Our monitoring stations report continued normal activity throughout human space. Agricultural shipments continue on schedule. Manufacturing centers maintain standard production levels. Civilian transportation follows regular patterns. If this is an evacuation, it's the most orderly one in galactic history. Fektar found this information puzzling. Every species the hegemony had encountered followed predictable patterns when faced with overwhelming force. They either surrendered immediately, attempted futile military resistance, or began chaotic evacuations of their most important populations and resources. The humans were doing none of these things. Perhaps they failed to comprehend the magnitude of our forces, suggested Vekhal. Unlikely. Our intelligence reports indicate they've observed our previous integration campaigns. They know our capabilities and methods. Their response suggests either supreme confidence in their defensive abilities or complete ignorance of military reality. The War Prime moved to the tactical hologram showing the meeting coordinates. His sensors detected nothing unusual about the location. Empty space, typical stellar background radiation, no significant gravitational anomalies. A perfectly ordinary region of vacuum suitable for diplomatic contact. How long until we reach the meeting point? Approximately 3 hours, War Prime. Shall I prepare the standard integration protocols? Fektar considered this question carefully. Standard protocol involved presenting the target species with documentation of hegemony military superiority, examples of successful integrations, and the terms of vassal status. Most civilizations required additional time to consult their leadership before formal surrender, but the process was generally concluded within one standard cycle. Yes, prepare the protocols. Also ready a demonstration of our capabilities. If these humans require additional persuasion, we should be prepared to provide it. The command deck of the inevitable conquest buzzed with efficient activity as crew members prepared for another routine diplomatic encounter. The ship itself was a monument to hegemony engineering, stretching nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern and housing a crew of 12,000. Its weapons systems could reduce a planet to molten slag within hours. Its defensive shields could withstand direct stellar radiation. Its engines could accelerate the massive vessel to 90% of light speed. It was one of 2,000 identical vessels in the fleet currently approaching human space. Fektar reviewed the intelligence reports on human civilization while his ship traveled toward the meeting coordinates. The humans had expanded rapidly through their local region, establishing colonies on dozens of worlds within 2 centuries. Their technology showed remarkable innovation despite its primitive foundation. Their social structures demonstrated impressive adaptability, to varying planetary conditions. Most interesting was their military doctrine, which seemed to emphasize flexibility and rapid technological advancement rather than massive force projection. Human ships were smaller than hegemony vessels, but appeared to incorporate cutting-edge developments in power generation and weapon systems. Their defensive installations prioritized mobility and redundancy over heavy fortification. War Prime were receiving a transmission from the Advanced Force at the Rigel system. Fektar turned his attention to the communication display. Fleet Master Zareth appeared, his expression showing the confusion typical of officers encountering unexpected situations. Report, Fleet Master. War Prime, the humans in this system have responded to our integration demands with what appears to be a counterproposal. They're requesting clarification of our authority to operate in their territory and asking for documentation of our legal justification for territorial transit. Fektar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme bewilderment. In 3 centuries of integration campaigns, no species had ever questioned the hegemony's legal authority to travel through their space. The concept of requiring justification for military operations was so alien to Zephyrian thinking that he struggled to formulate a response. They want legal documentation? Yes, War Prime. They've specifically requested copies of any treaties, agreements, or interstellar law citations that grant us passage rights through their territory. They've also asked for the formal diplomatic credentials of our negotiation team. The War Prime stared at the communication display for several moments before responding. Fleet Master explained to the humans that the hegemony operates under the authority of superior force. Our credentials are the 2,000 ships approaching their borders. I attempted that explanation, War Prime. They responded with a detailed analysis of what they term international law precedents and asked whether the hegemony recognizes the sovereignty of non-member species under what they call the principle of territorial integrity. Fektar turned to his strategic advisor with growing confusion. Vekhal, have you ever encountered this type of response during integration campaigns? Never, War Prime. Most species focus on military or economic concerns. I'm unfamiliar with these concepts of legal authority and territorial sovereignty in the context of integration operations. The War Prime decided to set aside this puzzling development for later analysis. Perhaps human civilization placed unusual emphasis on bureaucratic procedures. Such focus on administrative detail might actually facilitate their integration into hegemony structures. Fleet Master Zareth informed the humans that all legal questions will be addressed during formal negotiations. Maintain your position and await further orders. Understood, War Prime. The communication ended, leaving Fektar with an unusual sense of uncertainty. The humans were responding to hegemony contact in ways that had no precedent in his extensive experience. Their questions suggested sophisticated understanding of interstellar politics, yet their military preparations seemed almost casual in their organization. War Prime, we're approaching the meeting coordinates. Fektar turned his attention back to the tactical display. His flagship was now within scanning range of the designated location. Sensors showed exactly what they had detected from a distance: empty space with no unusual characteristics. Scan for human ships, life signs, or artificial structures. The sensor operator worked at his console for several minutes before reporting. Negative contacts, War Prime. I'm detecting standard cosmic background radiation, trace hydrogen, and minor gravitational influences from distant stellar bodies. No evidence of human presence at these coordinates. Expand scanning range to include surrounding space. Another pause while the sensors swept a broader area. Still negative, War Prime. No human vessels within detection range. Fektar felt the first stirrings of annoyance. Perhaps the humans had provided incorrect coordinates, or their primitive navigation systems had led them to the wrong location. Such technical failures were common among less advanced species attempting their first interstellar diplomacy. Communications: attempt contact with the human leadership. Inform them that we have arrived at the designated coordinates and are prepared to begin negotiations. Yes, War Prime. The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with concern. War Prime, I'm receiving an automated response from the Human Communication Network. The message states that their diplomatic representative is present and ready to begin discussions. Where? Our sensors detect no human presence. The message includes specific instructions, War Prime. It states that we should direct our attention to the spatial coordinates we transmitted and prepare to receive their opening diplomatic statement. Thektar studied the empty space around his flagship with growing confusion. Human diplomatic methods were proving more bizarre than he had anticipated. Perhaps they intended to conduct negotiations remotely through long-range communications rather than face-to-face meetings. Very well. Inform them that we're prepared to receive their statement. The communications officer relayed the message and waited for a response. After several minutes, he looked up with obvious confusion. War Prime, they're stating that their opening statement has already begun. They suggest we observe the space around our current position for what they term diplomatic clarification. The War Prime ordered maximum sensor sweeps of the surrounding area. His tactical displays showed nothing but vacuum in all directions. Whatever the humans intended to communicate through this bizarre procedure, it was completely invisible to hegemony detection systems. War Prime, the sensor operator reported with sudden alarm. I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies developing throughout the surrounding space. Thektar spun toward the tactical display as red warnings began flashing across multiple screens. The space around his flagship, which had been completely empty moments before, was now showing gravitational disturbances that made no sense according to any known physics. Specify the nature of these anomalies. War Prime, I'm reading gravitational fields that appear to be artificial in origin. They're distributed throughout the space around our fleet in a geometric pattern that shouldn't be possible. The main tactical display updated to show the gravitational readings. Thektar stared in amazement at what the sensors were revealing. The empty space around his 2,000 ships was actually filled with massive artificial constructs that had been completely invisible until this moment. Structures the size of small moons surrounded his fleet in a perfect sphere, each one generating gravitational fields that could only be produced by technology far beyond anything in the hegemony's experience. The empty coordinates the humans had selected for their meeting were actually the center of the largest artificial construct Thektar had ever encountered. Communications, contact the human representative immediately. Connection established, War Prime. A human voice, speaking clear galactic standard, filled the command deck. The tone was calm, professional, and completely without fear or deference. War Prime Thektar, I am Admiral Sarachun of the Terran Command. Welcome to humanity's response to your demands for passage through our territory. Thektar struggled to maintain his composure while staring at tactical displays that showed his fleet surrounded by impossible technology. Admiral Chun, our sensors are detecting artificial structures around our position. Please explain the nature of these installations. Certainly, War Prime. You are currently positioned within the effective range of 17 Prometheus-class gravitational manipulation platforms. Each platform is capable of generating localized gravitational fields equivalent to those produced by stellar mass objects. In simple terms, we can create artificial black holes wherever we choose within approximately 1 light hour of your current position. The command deck fell silent. Every officer on the flagship understood the implications of what the human had just described. Gravitational weapons were theoretical concepts in hegemony science, requiring technology that wouldn't be available for centuries of continued development. You're claiming to possess weaponized gravitational manipulation? I'm not claiming anything, War Prime. I'm demonstrating it. Please observe the space, approximately 50,000 kilometers to your starboard. Thektar turned his sensors toward the indicated coordinates. Space appeared normal until suddenly, a point of absolute darkness appeared, drawing in light and matter from the surrounding area. A miniature black hole, created from nothing, existed for exactly 10 seconds before disappearing as completely as it had appeared. The demonstration's message was unmistakable. The humans could create localized gravitational anomalies anywhere within their defensive perimeter. Any ship caught within such an effect will be torn apart by tidal forces beyond any defensive technology's ability to counter. War Prime, his sensor operator, reported with barely controlled panic. The gravitational effect we just observed required energy generation equivalent to the total output of our main fleet's power systems. And they created it instantaneously. Admiral Chen's voice continued with the same professional calm. Now that we've established the technological context for our discussion, let me address your original demands. You have requested passage through human territory to reach the Centauri cluster. Humanity's response is quite simple. Request denied. Fektar found his voice after several seconds of stunned silence. Admiral, the hegemony has integrated 47 species into our domain. Resistance to our authority has never succeeded. War Prime, you misunderstand humanity's position. We're not resisting your authority. We're informing you that your authority doesn't extend to human space. You have no legal, moral, or practical justification for demanding passage through our territory. The justification is superior force, Admiral. Really? Please explain how superior force applies to your current tactical situation. Fektar studied his tactical displays with growing alarm. His fleet of 2,000 ships was surrounded by weapons platforms that could apparently destroy any vessel instantaneously. The humans had somehow concealed massive installations throughout a region of space that had appeared completely empty. Their technology was demonstrably superior to anything the hegemony possessed. For the first time in his military career, War Prime Fektar was facing an opponent with clear technological and tactical superiority. Admiral Chun, perhaps we should discuss terms for hegemony withdrawal from this region. An excellent suggestion, War Prime. However, before we address your withdrawal, we need to discuss the matter of your advance forces that have already entered human territory without authorization. The tactical display updated to show real-time intelligence from across human space. Red indicators marked Zephyrian fleets that had approached several colonial systems, all of them now highlighted with targeting solutions from previously undetected human defensive installations. As you can see, your fleet master Zareth at Rigel is currently surrounded by similar gravitational manipulation platforms. The same applies to your forces approaching New Geneva, Proxima Station, and the Centauri mining operations. Every Zephyrian ship within 50 light-years of human space is now within range of weapons that could destroy them without warning. Fektar realized that he was experiencing something unprecedented in hegemony history. For the first time since the Empire's founding, a Zephyrian fleet was completely at the mercy of another species' military technology. What are your terms, Admiral? Simple and non-negotiable, War Prime. All hegemony forces will withdraw beyond a 50 light-year buffer zone around human territory. The hegemony will formally recognize human sovereignty over our current territorial claims. Any future approach to human space will require advanced diplomatic clearance through proper channels. And if the hegemony refuses these terms, Admiral Chen's response carried the certainty of absolute tactical superiority. Then, War Prime, you and your crews will have the honor of being the first Zephyrian forces to discover what happens when an unstoppable force encounters an immovable object. Fektar understood the reference. Human culture apparently included sophisticated knowledge of physics principles. They were informing him that this situation would resolve the ancient paradox through practical demonstration. Admiral, I lack the authority to agree to these terms on behalf of the hegemony. Understood, War Prime. You have 12 hours to contact your leadership and obtain the necessary authorizations. During this time, your fleets will remain in their current positions. Any attempt to advance further into human space or to withdraw beyond communications range will result in immediate gravitational interdiction. The communication ended, leaving Fektar staring at tactical displays that showed his mighty fleet trapped by weapons that shouldn't exist. The humans had demonstrated technological capabilities that rendered hegemony military doctrine completely obsolete. Worse, they had done so while maintaining perfect diplomatic courtesy. Strategos Vekal analysis. His strategic advisor was studying the sensor readings with obvious fascination. War Prime, the humans have achieved something remarkable. They've created a defensive system that provides absolute tactical superiority without requiring massive force projection. Their gravitational weapons make traditional fleet engagements irrelevant. How is such technology possible? Unknown, War Prime. Our science directorate has theoretical models for gravitational manipulation, but practical applications are considered impossible with current understanding. The humans appear to have solved fundamental problems in physics that we haven't even begun to address. Thektar activated his long-range communication system and prepared to contact Hegemony High Command. This would be the first time in the Empire's history that a War Prime would report tactical defeat without engaging in actual combat. The implications for hegemony expansion policy would be profound. Communications: establish priority contact with the Supreme Council. Inform them that we have encountered a species with military technology superior to our own. As his communications officer worked to establish contact across hundreds of light years, Thektar continued studying the tactical displays. The humans had not simply built better weapons. They had fundamentally changed the nature of interstellar warfare by developing technology that made traditional concepts of fleet strength completely irrelevant. Most importantly, they had demonstrated this superiority while making reasonable diplomatic demands. They weren't seeking conquest or tribute. They simply wanted the hegemony to respect their territorial sovereignty and follow proper diplomatic protocols for future contact. Such moderation in the face of overwhelming tactical advantage was completely unprecedented in Thektar's experience. Every species the hegemony had encountered used military superiority to demand maximum advantage from their opponents. The humans were using their superior position to establish basic diplomatic relations. War Prime, we have established contact with High Command. The main display activated to show the Supreme Council chamber on the hegemony's capital world. 5 ancient Zephyrians, each representing centuries of imperial authority, appear before him. Their expressions showed the gravity appropriate to receiving a priority military communication from an active war zone. War Prime Thektar, the Supreme Coordinator, spoke with the authority of the Empire's highest office. Report your situation. Supreme Coordinator, the human species possesses military technology that renders our current forces tactically irrelevant. They have demonstrated the ability to create weaponized gravitational effects that could destroy our entire fleet without warning. Our forces are currently surrounded and unable to advance or withdraw without their permission. The silence that followed this report lasted for several minutes. The Supreme Council was processing information that challenged every assumption about hegemony military supremacy. Elaborate on the nature of their technology, War Prime. Thektar transmitted his tactical readings and sensor records to the capital. The Supreme Council reviewed the data with obvious amazement. Gravitational weapons existed only in theoretical studies within the hegemony's most advanced research institutions. What are their demands? The Supreme Coordinator finally asked. Recognition of their territorial sovereignty, withdrawal of all hegemony forces beyond a 50-light-year buffer zone, and diplomatic protocols for future contact. They appear to seek peaceful coexistence rather than conquest or tribute. Another long silence. The Supreme Council was confronting the possibility that hegemony expansion had encountered its first permanent boundary. The humans weren't simply another species to be integrated. They were a civilization with the capability to enforce their independence. War Prime, maintain your current position. The Council will consider humanity's demands and provide instructions within the allocated time period. The communication ended, leaving Thektar alone with his thoughts and his surrounded fleet. He understood that this moment would mark a fundamental change in galactic politics. For the first time in its history, the hegemony had encountered a species that could dictate terms from a position of absolute strength. The humans had announced their presence on the galactic stage in the most decisive way possible. They had demonstrated that territorial sovereignty could be enforced through superior technology rather than diplomatic submission. War Prime Thektar settled back in his command throne and prepared for the most unusual 12 hours of his military career. He was about to witness either the first negotiated settlement between the hegemony and a technologically superior species, or the first demonstration of weapons that could fundamentally change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Either way, the age of unchallenged hegemony expansion was about to end. Admiral Sarachin stood in the Terran Command Center's main briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of Zephyrian fleets throughout human space. The past 12 hours have been among the most intense in human history, as word of the confrontation spread through the colonies and triggered responses that surprised even her experienced military mind. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were transforming. Status report, Dr. Kovac, Chin requested as the scientist approached with her latest data compilation. Admiral, the technological acceleration we're witnessing is unprecedented. Every research facility, every colonial engineering department, every university laboratory is reporting breakthrough discoveries. It's as if the proximity of an existential threat has catalyzed human innovation beyond all previous measurements. Chin studied the research reports flowing across her screens. Gravitational manipulation was just the beginning. Human scientists were achieving technological advances that should have required decades of development, compressing centuries of theoretical research into practical applications within hours. Give me specifics. The quantum entanglement communication system is now operational across all human colonies. We have instantaneous coordination capabilities spanning 200 light-years. The molecular assembly platforms have produced functional antimatter containment systems. The biological research stations have developed atmosphere processors that can terraform entire worlds within months rather than centuries. Commander Hayes joined them with military intelligence updates. Admiral, the Zephyrian response has been interesting. Their Supreme Council has been in continuous session for 10 hours. Intelligence intercepts suggest they're experiencing internal debates unlike anything in their recorded history. What kind of debates? Whether to attempt military action against a technologically superior opponent, whether to negotiate from a position of weakness, or whether to withdraw entirely from this region of space. Apparently, they've never faced this decision matrix before. Shin nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians were discovering that 3 centuries of unopposed expansion had left them unprepared for encountering genuine resistance. Their military doctrine assumed technological superiority in all engagements. When that assumption proved false, their strategic thinking became paralyzed. What about our own colony's responses? Hayes consulted his tablet. That's the remarkable part, Admiral. Instead of panic or demands for evacuation, we're seeing unprecedented cooperation. Colonial governors are requesting permission to contribute resources to the defense effort. Civilian populations are volunteering for military service at rates that exceed our processing capabilities. Dr. Kovac added her observations. Admiral, I think we're witnessing something that hasn't happened since humanity left Earth. We're seeing our species respond to an external threat with complete unity of purpose. Every human colony, regardless of political differences or economic competition, is focusing on the same goal, ensuring that humanity remains free. The Admiral moved to the central tactical display, where real-time updates showed the continuing standoff with Zephyrian forces. War Prime Thektar's fleet remained motionless at the meeting coordinates, surrounded by gravitational manipulation platforms that could annihilate them instantly. Similar situations had developed around every Zephyrian force that had approached human territory. Communications. Any word from the hegemony leadership? Negative, Admiral. They appear to be conducting internal consultations. They're taking longer than anticipated. Shin smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were learning that threatening humanity produced consequences they hadn't anticipated. Not just military resistance, but fundamental changes in how humans thought about their place in the galaxy. Minister Caldwell approached with reports from the Colonial Parliament. Admiral, I just finished briefings with all colonial representatives. The unanimous consensus is that humanity should not compromise on territorial sovereignty under any circumstances. The Parliament is prepared to authorize whatever resources are necessary to maintain our independence. Interesting. What changed their minds? Yesterday, they were concerned about the risks of confronting a galactic empire. The gravitational weapons demonstration, Admiral. When the colonies realized that humanity possessed technology superior to anything the Zephyrians could deploy, the entire strategic calculus changed. Instead of seeing ourselves as primitives facing a superior civilization, we're now aware that we've become the superior civilization. Dr. Kovac pulled up technical specifications on our display. Admiral, there's something else you need to understand about our technological situation. The breakthrough in gravitational manipulation has opened pathways to discoveries we hadn't even theorized. Our physics departments are reporting that we're on the verge of technologies that could reshape galactic civilization, such as faster-than-light travel that doesn't require the traditional jump gates, matter conversion systems that could eliminate resource scarcity, energy generation that approaches the theoretical maximum efficiency, defensive systems that could protect entire star systems from any conceivable attack. Chun absorbed this information with growing amazement. Humanity's response to the Zephyrian threat was revealing capabilities that had remained dormant until external pressure forced their development. The species that had struggled for 3 centuries to establish viable colonies was discovering that they possessed the potential to become the dominant technological power in the galaxy. How long until these theoretical capabilities become practical applications? Based on current development rates, Admiral, we're looking at months rather than years. The combination of necessity and unprecedented cooperation is accelerating research beyond all previous experience. A priority alert sounded across the command center. Commander Hayes checked his console and looked up with concern. Admiral, we're receiving communications from 17 different species throughout this galactic region. Apparently, word of our confrontation with the Zephyrians has spread. What do they want? Various things, Admiral. 3 species are requesting formal diplomatic relations. 7 are asking for military assistance against hegemony forces in their territory. 4 are offering to share intelligence about Zephyrian capabilities and strategies. 2 are proposing formal alliances against imperial expansion. 1 is offering to join the Human Colonial Confederation. Chun studied this information with growing understanding. Humanity's demonstration of technological superiority wasn't just affecting the Zephyrians. It was catalyzing political changes throughout the entire galactic region. Commander, how many species are currently under Zephyrian control in this sector? Intelligence estimates suggest approximately 43 species have been integrated into the hegemony within the past 50 years, Admiral. Most were forced into vassal status through military intimidation rather than actual conquest. And how many of those species are now seeking contact with humanity? Hayes recalculated the communication logs. 26, Admiral. More than half of the hegemony's recent acquisitions are attempting to establish contact with us. Dr. Kovac looked up from her research displays with excitement. Admiral, I think we're witnessing the beginning of a galactic revolution. Humanity's refusal to submit to hegemony authority is inspiring resistance throughout the region. Species that submitted to superior force are now realizing that superior force can be challenged. The tactical display updated with new intelligence from across the galactic sector. Red indicators showed Zephyrian forces, blue showed human positions, but now green indicators were appearing throughout the region as other species began organizing resistance movements. Chin realized that humanity had inadvertently triggered something far larger than a simple territorial dispute. By demonstrating that the hegemony could be successfully opposed, humans had provided hope to dozens of subjugated civilizations. The confrontation was evolving from a bilateral conflict into a galactic independence movement. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported, "we're receiving a priority communication from War Prime Thektar. The Hegemony Supreme Council has reached a decision. Put it through on the main display." The holographic projector activated to show the War Prime's command deck. Thektar appeared calm, but noticeably more respectful than during their initial contact. Behind him, tactical displays showed that his fleet remained motionless within humanity's gravitational weapon range. "Admiral Chun, the Supreme Council has authorized me to negotiate a formal agreement regarding territorial boundaries and diplomatic protocols." "I'm listening, War Prime." "The Hegemony is prepared to recognize human territorial sovereignty within your current colonial boundaries, plus the requested 50 light-year buffer zone. We will establish formal diplomatic relations through proper channels and respect your territorial integrity in future operations." Chen exchanged glances with her staff. The Zephyrian offer met humanity's minimum requirements for a peaceful resolution. However, the broader galactic situation had evolved beyond simple territorial recognition. "War Prime, your offer addresses bilateral relations between humanity and the Hegemony. However, we've become aware of additional complications that require discussion." Thektar's expression showed confusion. "What complications, Admiral?" "We've received contact from 26 species currently under Hegemony control, all requesting assistance in establishing their own independence. Humanity's position is that any agreement with the Hegemony must address the broader issue of self-determination for all sentient species in this region." The War Prime's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence, indicating extreme surprise. "Admiral, you're requesting that the Hegemony release territorial holdings throughout this entire galactic sector? I'm informing you that humanity will not enter into agreements that legitimize the subjugation of other species. Any peace settlement must include provisions for the self-determination of all civilizations currently under Hegemony control." Thektar was silent for several moments while processing this unexpected development. The humans weren't simply seeking their own independence. They were demanding the liberation of every species within hundreds of light years. "Admiral, what you're requesting would effectively eliminate Hegemony authority throughout this region. The Supreme Council would never agree to such terms." "Then, the Supreme Council needs to understand that humanity's technological superiority extends beyond gravitational weapons, War Prime. We're prepared to provide military assistance to any species seeking independence from Imperial control." Chun activated a secondary display showing human fleet deployments throughout the region. The Zephyrians would see that humanity had positioned vessels near every contested system, all equipped with the same gravitational manipulation technology that had neutralized the main Hegemony fleet. "Dr. Kovac, please explain to War Prime Thektar the current status of our defensive systems." The scientist stepped forward with obvious enthusiasm. "War Prime, humanity has now deployed gravitational manipulation platforms throughout this entire galactic region. Every star system within 200 light-years of Earth is protected by defensive installations that can interdict any hostile force. Additionally, our rapid deployment capabilities allow us to establish new defensive positions within hours rather than weeks. Furthermore," Chen added, "our technological development continues to accelerate. Within 6 months, we expect to deploy systems that will make current gravitational weapons appear primitive." The Hegemony's window for negotiating a peaceful settlement is rapidly closing. Thektar studied the tactical displays with obvious concern. The humans had transformed from a minor territorial concern into a technological superpower capable of challenging Hegemony authority throughout an enormous region of space. "Admiral, I must consult with the Supreme Council regarding these expanded demands." "Of course, War Prime. However, I should mention that while you're consulting with your leadership, humanity is providing immediate military assistance to any species requesting help in achieving independence. Our technological advantages make such assistance highly effective." The communication ended, leaving the Terran Command Center buzzing with activity as reports came in from across the galactic region. Human ships equipped with gravitational weapons were moving to support resistance movements on dozens of worlds. Species that had submitted to hegemony rule were discovering that liberation was possible with proper technological assistance. Dr. Kovac approached with updated technical reports. Admiral, our technological acceleration is producing even more remarkable results. The research teams have achieved breakthrough developments in consciousness transfer, matter transportation, and what they're calling reality manipulation through controlled application of quantum field theory. Reality manipulation? The ability to alter fundamental physical constants within localized regions of space, Admiral. In practical terms, we could make hegemony weapons systems simply stop functioning by changing the laws of physics in their immediate vicinity. Chun stared at the scientist with amazement. Humanity wasn't just developing superior technology. They were developing capabilities that approached what other species would consider godlike powers. How was this level of advancement possible? Admiral, I believe humanity has always possessed this innovative potential. What changed was the external pressure that forced us to fully utilize our capabilities. Faced with an existential threat, human civilization is revealing intellectual and creative resources that remain dormant during peaceful expansion. Commander Hayes interrupted with urgent intelligence updates. Admiral, we're receiving reports from throughout the galactic region. 18 different species have declared independence from hegemony control in the past 6 hours. Human technical assistance is enabling resistance movements that the Zephyrians can't suppress with conventional military force. What's the hegemony's response? Confusion, Admiral. They're attempting to deploy forces to suppress the rebellions, but our gravitational interdiction systems are preventing their ships from reaching the contested systems. For the first time in their history, the hegemony is unable to enforce its authority through military intimidation. Chun moved to the main tactical display, watching as green indicators representing independent species spread across the galactic map. Humanity had inadvertently triggered the largest liberation movement in galactic history. Civilizations that had accepted subjugation for centuries were discovering that technological superiority could overcome imperial oppression. Minister Caldwell, what's the colonial parliament's position on our expanding involvement? Full support, Admiral. The parliament has authorized unlimited resources for what they're calling the Galactic Liberation Initiative. Colonial representatives believe that humanity's long-term security requires the elimination of imperial systems throughout our region of space. And the public response? Enthusiasm beyond anything in our history, Admiral. Human colonists are volunteering for military service, scientific research, and diplomatic missions at unprecedented rates. It appears that confronting the Zephyrians has awakened something in human nature that had been dormant since we left Earth. Dr. Kovac added her analysis. Admiral, I think we're witnessing the emergence of humanity as a galactic superpower. Our technological capabilities are advancing so rapidly that we're approaching levels of development that would allow us to reshape galactic civilization according to human values. Chun considered the implications of this assessment. 3 days ago, humanity had been a minor colonial civilization concerned about territorial expansion. Today, they were the dominant technological power in their region of space, leading a liberation movement that could fundamentally alter the balance of galactic politics. Dr. Kovac, what are these human values that would reshape galactic civilization? Self-determination, Admiral. The belief that every species has the right to choose its own destiny without external coercion. Individual liberty protected by collective security. Scientific advancement guided by ethical considerations. Cooperation based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical dominance. In other words, we're proposing to export human political philosophy to the galaxy. Exactly, Admiral. And our technological superiority gives us the capability to enforce these principles throughout our region of space. A priority alert interrupted their discussion. The main display activated to show an incoming communication from the Hegemony Supreme Council itself. The 5 ancient Zephyrians who ruled an empire spanning thousands of light years appear before them, their expressions grave. Admiral Chun, the Supreme Coordinator, spoke with obvious reluctance. The Hegemony Supreme Council requests formal negotiations regarding the current crisis in this galactic sector. I'm listening, Supreme Coordinator. The rebellions you have inspired are spreading beyond your local region, Admiral. Species throughout Hegemony territory are declaring independence and requesting human technological assistance. The Empire is facing the largest internal crisis in its history. Chun smiled with satisfaction. Humanity's demonstration of technological superiority had achieved something no military conquest could accomplish. They had inspired hope throughout an empire built on the suppression of hope. What are you proposing, Supreme Coordinator? A comprehensive restructuring of galactic governance in this region, Admiral. The Hegemony is prepared to negotiate the establishment of an independent confederation of species under human technological protection. The Supreme Coordinator was offering something unprecedented, the voluntary dissolution of imperial authority throughout an enormous region of space. Humanity had achieved in 3 days what military campaigns couldn't accomplish in centuries. Supreme Coordinator, humanity is prepared to discuss the establishment of a galactic confederation based on the principles of species self-determination and mutual cooperation. However, such discussions will include representation from all species seeking independence, not just humanity and the Hegemony. Understood, Admiral. The Supreme Council authorizes comprehensive negotiations with all interested parties. As the communication ended, Chen realized that humanity had accidentally discovered its destiny among the stars, not as conquerors or merchants, but as liberators and guardians of freedom throughout the galaxy. The Terran Command had declared that no galactic empire could cross their border. In defending that principle, they had triggered the transformation of galactic civilization itself 6 months after the first confrontation with the Zephyrian hegemony. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the assembled representatives of 43 species in the newly constructed Galactic Confederation Hall on Luna. The massive structure, built using human reality manipulation technology, existed partially in normal space and partially in what scientists called quantum reality, allowing beings with incompatible atmospheric and gravitational requirements to meet in the same physical location. The sight before her would have been impossible to imagine when humanity first encountered the Zephyrians. Species that had been enemies for millennia sat side by side, united by their shared commitment to the principles of self-determination and mutual cooperation. The hegemony's forced integration policies had created artificial boundaries between civilizations. Now, those boundaries were dissolving as species discovered they had more in common than their imperial overseers had allowed them to realize. Fellow delegates, Chen addressed the assembly. 6 months ago, humanity faced a simple choice: submit to imperial authority or defend our independence. Today, that choice has evolved into something far more significant. We stand at the founding of a new form of galactic governance, one based on cooperation rather than domination. The response from the assembled delegates was a symphony of approval expressed in 43 different forms of communication. Some species used traditional vocalizations, others employed color patterns, electromagnetic frequencies, or quantum field fluctuations. Human translation technology rendered all expressions simultaneously, creating a harmony of diverse agreement. Dr. Elizabeth Kovac, now serving as humanity's chief science representative, approached the podium with her latest research updates. The past 6 months had seen technological advancement that challenged every assumption about the limits of physical possibility. Delegates, I'm pleased to report that the Confederation's technological development continues to accelerate beyond all previous measurements. Our joint research initiatives have achieved capabilities that individual species could never have developed alone. She activated the Hall's quantum display system, showing three-dimensional models of technologies that had emerged from interspecies cooperation. The Altarian crystalline matrix technology, combined with human gravitational manipulation, has produced faster-than-light communication systems with unlimited range. Zephyrian metallurgical expertise, freed from imperial restrictions, has enabled the construction of materials that exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The display shifted to show star maps dotted with installations that defied traditional engineering concepts. Most significantly, the combination of human reality manipulation with Scian consciousness projection has allowed us to create what we're calling living space stations, artificial habitats that adapt themselves to the needs of their inhabitants. Chen watched the delegates' responses with satisfaction. The Galactic Confederation wasn't simply a political alliance. It was becoming a fusion of technologies and philosophies that was creating entirely new possibilities for civilization. Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Republic, one of the first species to join the Confederation, gestured for recognition. His crystalline form reflected the ambient light in patterns that human technology translated into speech. Admiral Chun, the Altarian Republic wishes to express gratitude for humanity's role in our liberation from hegemony control. However, we also wish to address concerns about the rapid pace of technological development throughout the Confederation. Please elaborate, Ambassador. Our collective capabilities are advancing so rapidly that we risk creating technologies beyond our ability to control or understand. Some of our scientists believe we're approaching what they term technological singularity, the point where artificial intelligence and reality manipulation combine to produce unpredictable consequences. Dr. Kovac stepped forward to address this concern. Ambassador Veltar raises important points that our research councils have been discussing extensively. Yes, our technological capabilities are advancing at unprecedented rates. However, we've also developed safeguards that prevent dangerous applications. She activated new displays showing the ethical frameworks that govern Confederation research. Every technological development undergoes evaluation by multi-species committees that include philosophers, ethicists, and representatives from civilizations that might be affected by the technology. No advancement is implemented until we achieve consensus on its safety and beneficial applications. Commander Hayes, now promoted to Director of Confederation Security, joined the discussion with strategic updates. Delegates, while we celebrate our technological achievements, we must also address the broader galactic situation. Our liberation movement has inspired independence movements throughout the galaxy. The hegemony reports that over 300 species have declared independence in the past 6 months. The scale of the galactic transformation was staggering. Humanity's refusal to submit to imperial authority had triggered the collapse of the largest empire in galactic history. Species that had been under Zephyrian control for centuries were discovering they possessed capabilities that had been suppressed by imperial policies. However, Hayes continued, this rapid expansion has also created challenges. The hegemony's remaining territories are experiencing internal conflicts as different species compete for resources and territory formerly controlled by imperial administration. Chen had anticipated this development. The collapse of any large-scale governmental system created power vacuums that could lead to chaos rather than freedom. The Confederation needed to address these challenges before they destabilized the entire galactic region. Director Hayes, what's our current capability for providing assistance to newly independent species? Our rapid deployment technology allows us to establish defensive installations around any star system within 48 hours, Admiral. The reality manipulation platforms can create habitable environments for species with special requirements. Our consciousness projection technology enables instantaneous communication and coordination across unlimited distances. And our resource capacity? Dr. Kovac provided the analysis. Admiral, our matter conversion systems have effectively eliminated resource scarcity throughout Confederation space. We can provide any species with the materials they need for technological development and habitat construction. The limiting factor is no longer resources, but rather our ability to train personnel in the use of advanced technologies. Chun considered this information while studying the star charts, showing the expanding zone of independence throughout the galaxy. Humanity had become responsible for the largest political transformation in galactic history. With that responsibility came the obligation to ensure that freedom didn't devolve into chaos. Dr. Kovac, what's the current status of our consciousness transfer research? The scientist's expression showed obvious excitement. Admiral, we've achieved successful consciousness transfer between individuals of the same species and are approaching the theoretical possibility of consciousness transfer between different species. The implications are profound. Specify the implications. If we can enable consciousness transfer between species, we can create a form of empathy that transcends biological limitations. Imagine beings who can literally experience reality from the perspective of other species. Such capability would eliminate the misunderstandings and conflicts that have plagued galactic civilization for millennia. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline form brightened with interest. Dr. Kovac, are you suggesting that different species could actually share consciousness experiences? Not just share, Ambassador. With sufficient technological development, different species could temporarily merge consciousness, experiencing reality through multiple biological and intellectual frameworks simultaneously. Such beings would possess understanding of life that no single species could achieve alone. The implications of this possibility sent waves of discussion through the assembled delegates. Consciousness transfer between species would create forms of understanding that had never existed in galactic history. It would make cooperation not just possible, but natural, as beings would literally understand each other's perspectives. Chin realized that humanity was inadvertently creating the foundation for a post-biological civilization. The Confederation wasn't just liberating species from imperial control. It was enabling evolution toward forms of existence that transcended traditional biological limitations. Dr. Kovac, what time frame are we looking at for practical applications of interspecies consciousness transfer? Current development rates suggest we could have functional systems within 12 months, Admiral. However, implementation would require extensive testing and ethical review. We're talking about fundamentally altering the nature of consciousness itself. Commander Hayes raised security concerns. Admiral, our intelligence networks are detecting increased activity in the galactic core regions. The remaining hegemony territories are attempting to consolidate their forces and develop countermeasures to our technological advantages. What kind of countermeasures? Unknown, Admiral. They're conducting research in areas that our scientists describe as exotic physics. Apparently, they're attempting to develop technologies that operate outside normal space-time, making them immune to our reality manipulation systems. Chun wasn't surprised by this development. The Zephyrians had ruled a galactic empire for centuries by adapting to challenges and developing superior solutions. They wouldn't simply accept the collapse of their authority without attempting technological responses. Director Hayes, what's our current defense capability against exotic physics weapons? Limited, Admiral. Our reality manipulation systems operate within normal space-time. Weapons that function outside those parameters could potentially bypass our defenses entirely. Dr. Kovac looked up from her research displays with concern. Admiral, there's something else. Our physics departments are detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the galactic core. The hegemony appears to be conducting experiments that are affecting the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Could they be attempting to develop reality manipulation systems of their own? Possibly, Admiral. Or they might be working on something that makes reality manipulation irrelevant. Our theoretical physics suggests that sufficiently advanced civilizations could develop technologies that operate outside normal physical laws entirely. Chen absorbed this information while studying tactical displays showing hegemony activity throughout the galaxy. The remaining Imperial territories were mobilizing resources on a scale that suggested preparation for total warfare rather than diplomatic resolution. Delegates, Chen addressed the assembly. We appear to be facing a new phase in our relationship with the remaining hegemony territories. Their research activities suggest they're developing technologies specifically designed to counter our defensive advantages. The representatives responded with obvious concern expressed through their various communication methods. The prospect of renewed conflict threatened the cooperative atmosphere that had enabled the Confederation's remarkable development. Ambassador Veltar spoke for many delegates when he asked, "Admiral Chun, does humanity believe military confrontation is inevitable?" Ambassador, humanity's position remains unchanged. We support the right of all species to choose their own destiny without external coercion. If the hegemony attempts to reassert imperial control through force, we will provide whatever assistance is necessary to maintain independence. But, Admiral, interjected Representative Kexhar of the Rigel Liberation Council, our intelligence suggests that hegemony weapons development may have progressed beyond our ability to counter. What if they've developed technologies that make our defenses ineffective? Chen smiled grimly. Representative Kexhar, 6 months ago, the hegemony possessed overwhelming technological superiority over humanity. That superiority proved irrelevant when we developed capabilities they couldn't comprehend or counter. If the now developing exotic physics weapons will develop exotic physics defenses. Dr. Kovac nodded with enthusiasm. Admiral, the Confederation's research capacity exceeds anything the hegemony possesses. We have 43 species contributing their unique perspectives and capabilities to technological development. Whatever they create, we can create something better. The discussion was interrupted by urgent communications from the Confederation's early warning networks. Director Hayes consulted his displays and looked up with alarm. Admiral, our monitoring stations throughout the galaxy are detecting massive energy buildups in 17 different hegemony core systems. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Time to completion? Unknown, Admiral. The energy pattern suggests they're preparing some kind of coordinated operation, but we can't determine the nature or timeline. Chen realized that the period of peaceful technological development was ending. The hegemony had used the past 6 months to develop responses to humanity's reality manipulation systems. Whatever they were preparing, it would represent the ultimate test of the Confederation's technological and philosophical advantages. Dr. Kovac, initiate emergency protocols for all research initiatives. I want every theoretical technology accelerated to practical application. Director Hayes, begin deployment of our most advanced defensive systems throughout Confederation space. As the Galactic Confederation prepared for the next phase of their confrontation with Imperial authority, Chun understood that humanity's original declaration had evolved into something far more significant. They weren't just defending their borders anymore. They were protecting the principle that conscious beings had the right to determine their own destiny. The upcoming conflict would determine whether freedom or domination would shape the future of galactic civilization. Humanity had discovered technologies that could remake reality itself. Now, they would learn whether reality manipulation was sufficient to preserve liberty against forces that operated beyond reality altogether. The war for galactic liberation was entering its final phase, and the outcome would determine whether consciousness itself remained free to evolve beyond the limitations that had defined life throughout the galaxy's history. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Quantum Operations Center deep within Luna's core, surrounded by displays showing energy readings that challenged every assumption about physical possibility. The hegemony's coordinated attack had begun 3 hours ago with the simultaneous activation of exotic weapons systems across 17 core worlds. Reality itself was being reshaped as weapons that operated outside normal space-time attempted to destroy the Confederation's defensive network. The war for galactic liberation had entered its final phase. Status report, Dr. Kovac. Chun commanded as gravitational waves from the galactic core sent tremors through Luna's quantum-stabilized structure. Admiral, the hegemony's exotic physics weapons are more advanced than our worst-case projections. They're using what?